Hello, welcome, and hello again. To everyone out there who said I couldn't do it. To everyone who said, Jackson, you're crazy. A book about so much stuff, along with all the stuff you already upload. How can you make a video about books at all? How can you read a book every week? And to that I say, hello, and welcome to the review of The Lord of the Rings, Book 1. Let's jump into it. Alright, so my initial thoughts on this book. Well, I gotta say that it was fun. It was a good book. It was a great story to read through, and I'll tell you why. So, first of all, you have this whole tale that you get even before the book starts. The first maybe 40 pages are kind of this Reader's Digest as to the world you're about to enter. Because Middle-earth is one world that has been created by, J.R.R. Tolkien, and it's just a world that has so much to it that someone who just jumps into The Lord of the Rings may not even understand everything that's going on. So they detail everything from how the world works in terms of different races, being the dwarves and the elves and the humans. They also talk about certain traits that they have, like how the hobbits smoke pipes and things of that nature. And so you just come across this book and you're just like, oh, I can't wait to jump into this world. I wonder if it's like Game of Thrones or like The Witcher that's on Netflix right now, or anything like that. And it's like, no, this is the original of all those. And so you look at this book and you're like, okay, I can't wait. And so you open the book immediately and you find that you have to absorb all this prologue, I guess. This book is structured a lot like a typical movie. Like, I can understand how when they develop this into the 3-hour movie, which I haven't watched yet, and I want to. I'm going to get to it, and then I think maybe this week I'll watch it, and we'll do a part 2 to this video, where we continue talking about the book and the movie side by side, because I wanted to record this video while the book was still fresh in my mind. I finished it last night. It was a great way to end off the book as well. But we go from the prologue right into the story of Bilbo, who, is this older hobbit now who has lived on this great adventure a long time ago, which is the premise of the Hobbit books later on. And now he is about to leave the Shire, which is where all the hobbits live, and he has a little bit of a secret. See, he has this ring, right? This ring called the One Ring. And, obviously I'm explaining all this. Stop me if you've heard it before. You probably have. But he has this One Ring. It has the power to control basically everything. I mean, it has the power to control all of these other rings, which have been made for humans, dwarves, all of the above, and there's one presence that wants to control the One Ring. And so Bilbo has hung on to this ring mostly because it has this weird ability to make people want to hold it and hold on to it and kind of drive them mad. And so he gives it to Frodo, and he leaves, he pieces out. And then that's when our quest really begins, because Gandalf, this great wizard, comes up to Frodo and says, hey man, look, we gotta go. We gotta do all this stuff. We gotta put the ring back, and we gotta destroy it, because if we don't destroy it, things are gonna get pretty messy around here. And Frodo's like, dude, I'm just trying to chill. I'm 30 years old. That's basically a teenager for Hobbit years. I'm trying to just chill. And then Gandalf's like, nah bro, that's not how it works. So then the story actually begins, and we leave the Shire. Now, once we leave the Shire, things for me started to get a little bit interesting, because as I read the book, I was like, I wonder if I'm actually going to get tired of reading this. And as I read, the beginning of it, the first 100 pages, I kind of expected it to be kind of a slug through the book. I remember reading a bunch of the passages of them, traversing the landscape, moving from place to place. There's a lot of dialogue scenes. But as I read it, I kind of discovered that time just flew by with this book. And I think it's because J.R.R. Tolkien has such a way with descriptions and with choice words that make the story move in a good direction. So that being said, you move along the original premise of the story, you move along when they're going into Rivendell, which will progress the story even further into Act 2 and 3. You kind of don't even notice how much they've been traveling and how much you've actually been reading as the reader. And so that to be said about the dialogue, when they are speaking to each other, J.R.R. Tolkien does this thing where he'll take up, 4 paragraphs of just someone speaking. And to me, it's pretty unheard of from my reading experience. I know that I haven't exactly read a ton of books that were written in this time period, so it's pretty hard for me to examine that exactly. But I know that it is pretty interesting to be able to fully express the thoughts of a complete character out in multiple paragraphs, because they're just speaking, and so you don't have to cut them off, or you don't have to have this weird bridge between two characters where they just keep speaking over and over and over again. And so, with that being said, that's what makes this book so important to me on one level, is that you get these character interactions in which, you know, Gandalf can be talking to Frodo, Frodo can be talking to Sam, and then you have all of these different interactions which mean something. Because that's always the premise of a good story, when you can make a good connection between your characters. And I think the dialogue choices in this book really help with that. Alright, let's talk about almost Act 2. So once they get into Rivendell, I believe, or Rivendell, one of the two, you know, they enter and we find Bilbo again, and we find Gandalf, to be honest with you, and they're both there, both just chilling, and that's when we're about to pick up the story. But I think it's important to note that it did a good job, it being the whole book itself, did a really good job of letting Bilbo tell a story and letting Frodo tell his own story based off of it, right? Bilbo started this legacy, and Frodo can continue it with his own adventure, probably the biggest adventure of the whole series. And I should mention this, I'm reading all of these books, I'm watching all of the movies completely blind. I know very little about Lord of the Rings. I know some of the big twists and turns, which kind of sucks when you're reading, because then you're like, oh, shoot, I already know how this is going to pan out. But I will say that in terms of how everything is going so far, there's a lot of stuff that I just didn't know about, or there's a lot of interesting characters that I had no idea exactly what their deal was. Like Legolas, I had no idea what his whole thing is, or, you know, how he had a connection with Gimli. So, you know, we're just out here reading this book, and we go into Act 2 with now the whole fellowship ready to go. They're ready to go after that ring, and then they start traversing the landscape. And then I gotta say, once again, with the descriptions, you know, once they enter the Elven lands and they come across all of the beautiful landscape, and I don't remember if she was the queen of that sect of the elves or whatever, but, you know, they come across all of these elves in this forest, and it's kind of a weird take on what's going on, because as they're traversing, right, it gets darker and darker until you get to this one area where it's just like this little alcove of light right before they're going to go into basically the end game in books 2 and 3. And so you get a moment, almost as a last-ditch effort for J.R.R. Tolkien to give you the description of such a beautiful place, because the Lord of the Rings realm, the whole world landscape, is pretty beautiful in just reading it. Obviously, I think it looks great in the movies from what I remember seeing from stills and that sort of thing. But I definitely think that is the last time we're going to get into that. I mean, if I'm to make predictions about what's going to happen, because literally everyone that's watching this probably has read it except me or watched it. So I think that it's very interesting to see what the descriptions of places will look like moving forward, since they are supposed to get darker and darker and more insidious. And so coming to that point, there's also something to be said about predictions. So let's talk about my predictions. Now, Act 3 takes us into basically the final moments when the gang are on the boats, and then they ditch the boats and rest for a minute, and they come to this decision that Frodo has to decide what's going to happen, because they can go in multiple different directions. How are they going to proceed? And Frodo kind of just decides that it would be best if he takes the ring alone. Of course, Sam doesn't let that happen because he's kind of the caretaker. Sam follows Frodo, and then we're launched into book 2. So my predictions. Now, this is very interesting because, of course, I have no idea what's going to happen, and I kind of feel dumb making a predictions video for a book that's, number one, so well known, but also just such a renowned book. Everyone kind of gets the story except me, I guess. But I definitely want to see more of Frodo's thoughts, his inner workings of his mind. I obviously think that he's going to develop into a character that can stand on his own, especially because they mention in the book that he needs to start making decisions for himself instead of following Gandalf and Elrond and all of these people. And he is definitely going to develop some kind of backbone, of course. I definitely think that's going to happen. But other than that, I know the big twist, which I don't even know if I'll say it now, because, I mean, it's just better to mention in the next book or the last one. I don't know for sure. But he had the vision about it in this book, so if you know what I mean. And then, what else could I predict on this book? I think that I don't know if we're going to lose someone in the Fellowship. I definitely know that some may not travel to the end, but I don't know if anybody's going to die, per se. I mean, if I had to make a prediction of a death, it might be Sam, just because of how Sam is built up so much as a protector. And so if he were to die, it would kind of be this way for Frodo to enter an adult-like state of making decisions. But that's just my theory on that. So overall, I gotta say that Lord of the Rings, whether it be this one or the 12 dozen cover arts, you know, it was a great book. It was a great read. I'm glad that I was able to start reading the Lord of the Rings, especially during the summer before school starts. I can wrap a good series under my belt. And I'm glad that we could finally release another book review because, I mean, gosh darn it, we only released one, and then it was just like movie, TV, movie. So, that being said, if you like this video, make sure you hit like. If you want to subscribe, please subscribe. And I will see you guys tomorrow.